On the 13th of August 1940, a Dornier Do 17 reconnaissance aircraft crossed the Thames Estuary at 21,000 feet. The bombardier's Leica camera clicked through its program sequence, one frame every 3 seconds. The navigator checked coordinates against folded reconnaissance maps. They were photographing RAF Hornchurch, defending 32 miles of approaches to London. Yet when the film reached Luftwaffe Aufklärungsgruppe intelligence headquarters in Pas-de-Calais 3 hours later, the analysts marked the folder agricultural, low priority. The photographs showed wheat fields striped with harvest patterns, hedgerows defining field boundaries, scattered copses of trees. A chalk notation in the margin. Possible auxiliary landing ground. No permanent structures visible. The site was removed from the primary target list. This wasn't farmland. RAF Hornchurch was operating 48 Spitfires daily from 3 concrete runways, totaling 4,800 feet. The wheat was painted Hessian canvas. The hedgerows were ochre and burnt sienna stripes applied by artists from Shepperton Film Studios. The trees were real, but strategically left standing to break sight lines. This shouldn't have worked. Everyone in the Air Ministry knew you couldn't hide an airfield. The mathematics were brutal. A concrete runway stretched 800 yards, half a mile of pale grey surface, reflecting 30% more light than surrounding countryside. Dispersal areas covered 15 acres. Hangars rose 60 feet high, with 12,000 square feet of roof surface. The geometry shouted from aerial photographs. From 18,000 feet, a Heinkel-Hay Hond 11 navigator had 45 seconds to positively identify targets before passing overhead. But geometric patterns, long rectangles, regular edges, parallel lines, registered instantly against countryside's organic chaos. The human eye evolved to detect patterns. Straight lines don't exist in nature. A runway was as subtle as a ruler on a forest floor. Air Ministry officials were blunt in Parliamentary Defence Committee sessions throughout March 1940. Air Vice Marshal Richard Pearce, testifying on the 12th of March. Camouflage of operational airfields presents insurmountable practical difficulties. To cover RAF Biggin Hill would require 47,000 square yards of material. Current national production, 8,000 yards monthly. Paint fades within 6 weeks under operational conditions. Weather removes most patterns within 3 months. The conclusion was delivered with mathematical certainty. Airfield camouflage is strategically impractical. The logic was ironclad. To camouflage Britain's 52 operational fighter stations required covering 31,200 acres. Britain's entire pre-war canvas industry couldn't cover 8 stations. Paint stocks were earmarked for aircraft production, and Luftwaffe pilots weren't navigating blind. They carried detailed ordnance survey maps, had railway lines as guides, used radio direction finding. Finding airfields was trigonometry, not guesswork. German reconnaissance photographs from May 1940 proved the point. Croydon Aerodrome, 6 hangars, 3 runways, 156 aircraft visible in dispersal. RAF Northolt, geometric runway pattern clearly defined. Buildings casting measurable shadows at 0847 hours. RAF Kenley, blast pens arranged in precise 30-yard intervals, forming unmistakable rectangular grid. Luftwaffe Oberkommando analysts had compiled target folders for 127 British airfields by July 1940. Each folder contained annotated photographs with precise coordinates, approach routes and flak positions marked in red china pencil. The Luftwaffe had bombed its first British airfield, RAF Whiten, on 27th of June 1940. They hit the operations block, destroyed 4 hangars, cratered both runways, 15 aircraft destroyed. The attacking force, 12 Do-17s flying at 12,000 feet. Time from visual acquisition to bomb release, 22 seconds. The station was unmistakable from 10 kilometers distance, recorded Hauptmann Werner Baumbach in his combat log. Runways formed a perfect cross pattern against green fields. By early August 1940, the Luftwaffe had successfully struck 23 RAF stations. Their accuracy was improving. On the 12th of August, a single Ju-88 attacked RAF Tangmere at 07:15 hours, putting 2 runways out of action for 9 hours. On 13th of August, Adlertag, Eagle Day, coordinated strikes hit RAF Detling, 67 killed, 22 aircraft destroyed, RAF Andover, 11 hangars damaged, and RAF East Church, 17 aircraft destroyed. The Luftwaffe's reconnaissance photographs showed exactly where to aim. This was the context when Colonel John Turner was summoned to the Air Ministry on the 22nd of April 1940. Turner, 59 years old, Royal Engineers, had been the Director of Works and Buildings since 1931. He knew airfield construction intimately, had overseen expansion of 34 stations during the late 1930s. He was a qualified pilot. He understood infrastructure. Air Ministry Director of Operations handed Turner aerial reconnaissance photographs from German sources, captured from a downed Ju-111 near Ipswich. "These are what they see," he said. "These are what we need them to misinterpret." Turner studied the photographs for 17 minutes without speaking. The images showed RAF Mildenhall from 19,000 feet. Every runway was clearly visible. Every building cast a shadow. Dispersed aircraft appeared as clear dots. It looked like an engineering diagram. Then Turner did something unexpected. He held the photograph at arm's length and squinted. "How long does a bombardier look at this?" 5 to 8 seconds for visual confirmation. "While travelling at what speed?" 210 to 280 miles per hour at operational altitude. Turner calculated silently. At 250 miles, an aircraft covered 367 feet per second. Visual acquisition at 5 miles, 72 seconds total observation window. But terrain features, navigation, bomb site alignment, formation position, all competed for attention. The actual moment of target recognition, perhaps 3 seconds. "We're solving the wrong problem," Turner said. "We can't make them invisible. We make them unrecognizable." What Turner understood, what the Air Ministry's mathematical approach had missed, was that this wasn't a problem of physics. It was a problem of perception. The Luftwaffe wasn't asking, "Where are the airfields?" They knew where the airfields were. They were asking, "Is that the airfield?" The difference was everything. A bombardier travelling at 250 mph at 18,000 feet has 3 seconds to confirm visual identification. Not 3 seconds of careful study. 3 seconds while monitoring altitude, formation position, flak bursts, fighter threats. 3 seconds while squinting through plexiglass, while reading instrument panels, while listening to radio chatter about bandits at Angels 20. 3 seconds to match what he sees through the bomb site to what he remembers from the briefing folder photograph. If what he sees doesn't match, not wrong, just uncertain, he doesn't drop. Training doctrine was explicit. Doubtful identification requires second pass confirmation. A second pass meant breaking formation, circling back, extending time over target. It meant more fuel burned, more exposure to fighters, more anti-aircraft fire. It meant explaining to squadron commander why you didn't drop with the formation. Experienced crews wouldn't risk it. They'd mark the location as unable to confirm and proceed to alternate target. Turner wasn't creating invisibility. He was weaponizing doubt. The implementation came from an unexpected source. On 28th of April 1940, Turner visited Sound City Film Studios at Shepperton. The studios had been making motion pictures since 1932, elaborate period dramas shot entirely indoors on constructed sets. Their specialty, making 40-foot studio walls look like infinite landscapes, making plaster look like granite, making plywood look like oak beams aged 400 years. Turner explained the problem. Art director Thomas Schofield, who'd designed sets for historical epics, understood immediately. "You're not showing them something false," Schofield said. "You're breaking their pattern recognition." Within a week, Schofield's team built a scale model. They took an accurate model of a typical fighter station based on RAF Duxford and photographed it from above with cinema camera lenses matched to German reconnaissance specifications. Then they modified it. They didn't add camouflage, they added confusion. They painted runways, but not to look like grass. They painted them to look like ploughed fields with cultivation furrows. They painted taxiways to look like cart tracks. They painted dispersal areas to look like harrowed ground. They didn't hide the geometric shapes, they gave them agricultural explanations. Hedgerows were painted across runways, not randomly, but following existing field boundary patterns visible in adjacent farmland. The hedgerows didn't stop at the runway edge. They continued across onto actual fields, making the painted portions indistinguishable from genuine landscape features. Fake access roads were painted snaking across dispersals, mimicking farm tracks, complete with muddy ruts in brown and ochre. The roads connected to real roads at station perimeters. Genuine crops were planted. This was the breakthrough. RAF stations typically had unused land between dispersals, around perimeter tracks, in blast pen areas not immediately required. Turner's teams planted wheat, barley, oats, whatever matched surrounding farmland. As the crops grew, they created genuine agricultural patterns. Then artists painted canvas sections, 40,000 square yards per station, to match the growing crops exactly. Real wheat fields, painted wheat fields, bordered concrete, painted to look like wheat fields. From 18,000 feet, travelling at 250 mph, the distinction dissolved. At RAF Bassingbourn, 176 acres became integrated farmland. Genuine wheat occupied 52 acres in dispersal areas scheduled for autumn expansion. Painted canvas covered 41 acres of taxiways. Actual runways were painted with ochre, burnt sienna and raw umber, colours matching mature wheat at harvest time, arranged in stripes mimicking combine harvester patterns. Buildings were more complex. You can't hide a 60-foot-high hangar, but you can break its visual signature. Artists from Shepperton painted large hangars with oversized landscape patterns, trees, hedgerows, field boundaries, that made no sense close up, but which fragmented the building's outline from altitude. A hangar's geometric rectangular shape was disrupted by painted curved lines suggesting hills or copses. Some hangars received false roofs, angled canvas sheets stretched on wooden frames, painted to look like agricultural buildings or residential structures. RAF Hornchurch's main hangar received a painted roof resembling a Victorian mansion, complete with chimneys, dormers, and separate outbuilding structures. From 20,000 feet, it looked like a large estate house. Shadows were critical. A painted object without a shadow looks painted. Schofield's team studied sun angles for English summer at 51 degrees north latitude. They calculated shadow directions for morning and afternoon reconnaissance flights. The most common German reconnaissance times were 0630, 0830 and 1700 to 1900 hours, when slanting light made photography easier. Painted shadows were applied to runways to simulate hedgerow shadows, building shadows, even tree shadows. The shadows matched actual sun angles for July and August, peak Battle of Britain period. A reconnaissance photograph taken at 0745 hours showed shadows falling northwest at precisely the angle real shadows would fall. But Turner went further. He understood that professional intelligence analysts would study these photographs carefully. They'd look for inconsistencies. So he added them deliberately. Wheel ruts were painted onto dispersal areas, but not perfect ones. Some were muddy, some were dried, some showed tractor tyre patterns, some showed cartwheel patterns. Fields showed realistic wear, bare patches near gates, compressed vegetation along paths. Some painted wheat fields showed trampling patterns where cattle had supposedly crossed. Nothing was perfect. Agricultural landscapes aren't perfect. That was the point. At RAF Duxford, Turner's team left some areas completely uncamouflaged. 3 blast pens remained visible. Obvious circular structures clearly identifiable as military. If everything is camouflaged, they know it's important, Turner explained to skeptical station commanders. If only some things are camouflaged poorly, they think we're doing our best with limited resources. That's believable. The implementation rolled out to 52 stations between May and August 1940. Priority went to 11 group stations defending London and the South East: Hornchurch, Biggin Hill, Kenley, Northolt, Tangmere. These were the stations the Luftwaffe wanted most to destroy. Sound City Studios became a camouflage factory. 28 set painters, 11 carpenters, and 42 general labourers worked 3 shifts producing painted canvas sections. By July, they were manufacturing 15,000 square yards weekly. The canvas was treated with petroleum-based paint mixed with sand to create texture. Smooth canvas would look artificial. The textured surface caught light like actual vegetation. RAF ground crews received training. Station commanders were ordered to ensure painted canvas sections were moved every 3 days, rotated, repositioned, replaced. Nothing in a real landscape is static. Crops grow, fields change. The camouflage had to change too. Maintenance crews serviced aircraft in the open, but only during daylight hours when Luftwaffe reconnaissance was expected. At dawn and dusk, when reconnaissance was less likely, aircraft were moved into hangars. During probable reconnaissance windows, 0700, 0830 and 1730 to 1900, stations appeared dormant. Agricultural, quiet. Some stations went further. RAF Martlesham Heath maintained a flock of sheep that grazed dispersal areas. The sheep were real. They appeared in German reconnaissance photographs, grazing peacefully on what should have been operational aircraft parking areas. The photographs showed pastoral tranquility. What the photographs didn't show, the sheep were moved to interior fields at night when aircraft operations occurred. The grazing areas were concrete dispersals painted green. The sheep were props, 4-legged confirmation that this was merely farmland. While Turner's teams camouflaged real stations, they built fake ones. The decoy sites, codenamed K sites for daytime decoys, Q sites for nighttime decoys, were masterpieces of reverse logic. If you want the enemy to waste bombs on fake targets, the fake targets must look valuable. K sites were positioned 3 to 5 miles from real stations along likely approach routes. They featured obvious runways, concrete or painted grass, with visible aircraft parking areas. But the aircraft were dummies. Canvas stretched on wooden frames, painted in standard camouflage patterns. The aircraft looked correct from 10,000 feet. From 500 feet, they looked like bad theatrical props. The genius was the location. K sites were built where German navigators, approaching real stations, would see them first. A bomber formation approaching RAF Biggin Hill from the south-southeast would cross K site Tatsfield at 6 miles out. The decoy appeared before the real target. If the K site looked authentic enough for 3 seconds of observation time, bomber formations would commit to the attack pattern. Once committed, formation locked, bomb sight aligned, bomb bay doors open, they wouldn't abort. They'd drop on the decoy. Q sites were even simpler. Nighttime decoys consisted of electric lights arranged to mimic airfield lighting, runway perimeter lights, hangar floods, taxiway markers. The lights were controlled from a small concrete bunker operated by 2 airmen. When radar detected incoming bombers, the lights activated. From 15,000 feet at night, Q sites looked exactly like operational airfields. They showed all the characteristics of stations that had failed to black out properly. Lights visible from 20 miles away, perfect navigation beacons. The lights included mistakes. Overly bright hangar lights suggesting operations in progress, moving lights suggesting vehicles, occasional illumination of dummy aircraft suggesting maintenance activity. The deception wasn't showing a perfect blackout. It was showing realistic blackout failures. Between July and October 1940, the decoy network expanded to 119 K sites and 237 Q sites protecting 81 locations. Some sites were defended by anti-aircraft guns, not enough to seriously threaten bombers, but enough to make the sites believable. If an airfield didn't shoot back, crews would suspect deception. The most elaborate decoy was Q site SF-1B, Starfish, on Black Down in the Mendip Hills, protecting Bristol. The site simulated a burning city using controlled fires of creosote and paraffin in steel baskets. After the first wave of German bombers attacked actual Bristol, SF-1B lit 72 fire baskets arranged to mimic the street pattern of Bristol's industrial area. From 20,000 feet, the fires looked like bombs bursting. Second-wave bombers, seeing fires matching their briefing maps, dropped on the decoy. The fires burned in empty fields. The proof came in fragments, pieces of evidence that assembled into inescapable conclusion. Luftwaffe combat records, captured after the war, told part of the story. Between July and October 1940, 127 planned raids on confirmed priority airfield targets resulted in what German records classified as unable to locate or unable to confirm identification. Mission commanders reported arriving at coordinates, observing terrain that did not match briefing photographs, and proceeding to alternate targets. One Luftwaffe Kampfgeschwader, 56. Mission report, dated 18th of August 1940, described approaching RAF Kenley. Reached coordinates 1:42 hours. Observed agricultural land with wheat fields and farm buildings. No airfield structures visible. Possible navigation error. Proceeded to alternate target, Croydon Aerodrome. RAF Kenley was operating 42 Hurricane fighters. The wheat fields were painted canvas. The farm buildings were camouflaged hangars. The Luftwaffe formation bombed Croydon instead, 12 miles away, causing minor damage. Kenley continued operations without interruption. Post-war analysis of German bomb plots, overlaying actual bomb impact points onto maps of Britain, revealed the pattern. Strikes on decoy sites, 823 confirmed. Strikes on open fields within 400 yards of operational stations, 1,247 confirmed. Strikes on actual operational infrastructure, significantly fewer than expected based on German reconnaissance intelligence. The numbers compounded. Colin Dobinson, analysing captured German records for his 2000 study, Fields of Deception, calculated that Starfish decoy sites alone diverted approximately 968 tons of ordnance. At an average of £50 per bomb, that represented 38,700 individual bombs dropped on empty countryside instead of cities. K and Q sites, airfield decoys, diverted another estimated 2,000 tons. Total, approximately 3,000 tons of German bombs wasted on false targets between July 1940 and May 1941. To put that in context, the Coventry raid of 14th of November 1940, one of the war's most devastating attacks, delivered 500 tons of bombs. The decoys diverted the equivalent of 6 Coventrys, but the statistical evidence alone doesn't capture the human reality. Flight Lieutenant James Nicholson, 249 Squadron, stationed at RAF Boscombe Down, recorded in his log on 11th of August 1940, observed Dornier formation overhead 10:15 hours, altitude approximately 12,000 feet. Formation circled twice, clearly visible against cloud base. Expected attack did not materialize. Formation proceeded northeast. Station went to full alert, but no bombs fell. German aircraft appeared confused or uncertain of target. Boscombe Down's runways had been painted 6 days earlier with agricultural camouflage patterns. The station's 3 hangars had received false roofs, painted to resemble large residential buildings. Dispersal areas were camouflaged with painted hedgerows and copses. The Dornier formation bombed a decoy site 4 miles northeast. The decoy, K-Site Gomeldon, suffered minor damage. No casualties. Sergeant Pilot Eric Barwell, 611 Squadron, RAF Digby, 29th August 1940. Scrambled 1347 hours, vectored to intercept bomber formation approaching station. Made visual contact 15:02. Bandits approximately 20 He-111s at Angels 1-5. Formation passed directly over Digby but did not drop, pursued northeast. Bandits dropped on open ground near Woodhall Spa, approximately 8 miles from station. Reason for not attacking Digby unclear. RAF Digby had received camouflage treatment in July. The station's primary runway, 4,200 feet of concrete, had been painted with stripes resembling ploughed fields. Canvas sections painted to look like wheat had been positioned across taxiways. The He-111 formation attacked what they believed to be Digby's auxiliary landing ground. It was an actual farm. The farmer, Ernest Wakefield, survived by sheltering in a drainage ditch. His farmhouse was destroyed, but Digby, with 36 Spitfires, was untouched. These weren't isolated incidents. Between 11th of August and 15th of September 1940, the height of the Battle of Britain, RAF stations in 11 Group were attacked 169 times. Of those attacks, 47 resulted in near misses of 400 yards or more, suggesting the attackers struck adjacent fields, thinking they were hitting the target. The comparison is telling. During the same period, unprotected targets, ports, factories, rail yards, were hit with consistent accuracy. Luftwaffe bombardiers weren't incompetent. They were confused by targets that didn't match their expectations. The psychological impact went beyond missed attacks. Luftwaffe aircrew began doubting their navigation. If they couldn't reliably identify targets that should be obvious, what else were they getting wrong? Mission debriefs from September 1940 show increasing references to possible navigation error and unable to confirm identification. This uncertainty had operational consequences. Bomber formations took longer over target areas, circling, verifying, searching. Extended time over target meant more exposure to fighters, more fuel consumed, more opportunity for interception. Missions that should have taken 2 hours took 3. Return flights were made with minimal fuel reserves. Some formations aborted entirely. General Major Helmuth Förster, commanding officer of Luftflotte 5, wrote in his diary on 4th of September 1940, "Crews report increasing difficulty positively identifying targets in southern England. Camouflage and decoy measures appear more sophisticated than intelligence estimated. Multiple missions this week aborted due to inability to confirm targets. This is not acceptable but understandable. Crews will not waste ordnance on uncertain targets when fuel and weather already constrain operations," the RAF noticed. Air intelligence reports from September 1940 documented increased German reconnaissance activity and repeated passes over stations before attack commitment. The Germans were being more careful, which meant they were being slower, more tentative, more vulnerable. On the 15th of September 1940, now commemorated as Battle of Britain Day, Luftwaffe intelligence committed maximum resources to breaking British air defences. They launched 1,500 sorties, attacking airfields across southeast England. This was supposed to be the decisive blow. The results were catastrophic for the Luftwaffe. They lost 56 aircraft. RAF losses, 29 aircraft, but only 13 pilots killed. More critically, only 3 RAF stations suffered significant damage. The majority of German bombs fell on fields, decoys, or unimportant structures. RAF Biggin Hill, targeted by 88 German aircraft, received minor damage to 1 hangar and 2 blast pens. The main force of German bombs fell on surrounding farmland and on K-Site Leaves Green, 3 miles northwest. Biggin Hill was operational by nightfall. Park House, near RAF Tangmere, recorded the experience from the ground. Ellen Harrison, a Land Army worker, was harvesting wheat on the 16th of August, when German bombers passed overhead. We heard them before we saw them. The engine sound was different from our planes. Everyone dropped and lay flat in the wheat. I was certain they would bomb the field. It was very close to the airfield, maybe a mile. But they flew right over. We heard the bombs explode in the distance, maybe 2 or 3 miles away. When we stood up, we could see smoke rising from somewhere near Shopwick. Later we learned they'd bombed open fields. The actual airfield was undamaged. Tangmere had received camouflage painting 5 weeks earlier. The runways were painted with agricultural patterns. Hangars were disguised with false roofs. The station's wheat fields, genuine crops planted in dispersal areas, matched surrounding farmland perfectly. From the bombers' perspective, everything looked like farmland. The real target was invisible within the agricultural landscape. By October 1940, the pattern was undeniable. RAF Fighter Command operational reports documented attack accuracy rates. Airfields with camouflage and associated decoys. 23% direct hit rate on critical infrastructure, runways, hangars, fuel storage. Airfields without camouflage, 61% direct hit rate. The difference represented hundreds of bombs diverted. At an average of 5 casualties per direct hit on operational infrastructure, the camouflage effort saved an estimated 1,800 RAF personnel between July and October 1940. But the strategic impact went beyond immediate casualties. Airfields that remained operational kept fighters flying. Those fighters shot down German bombers. Those German bombers, had they succeeded in cratering runways, would have attacked cities. The mathematics cascaded. A single German bomber dropping 4,000 pounds of ordnance on a city killed an average of 12 civilians, based on Blitz casualty data. If decoy airfields prevented 500 bombing missions against cities, a conservative estimate based on captured German records, that represented 6,000 civilian lives saved. Turner's conservative accounting, compiled in November 1940, estimated decoy operations had diverted 730 bombing raids from intended targets between July and October. Colin Dobinson's later analysis, using German archives unavailable to Turner, revised that number to approximately 900 raids diverted. 900 raids at an average of 10 bombers per raid. 9,000 bomber sorties misdirected. At 2,500 pounds of bombs per sortie, 22,500 pounds of ordnance, 11,250 tons, dropped on the wrong targets. The comparison is stark. The entire London Blitz, from September 1940 to May 1941, delivered approximately 18,800 tons of bombs. Decoy operations diverted the equivalent of 60% of the entire London Blitz. The fuel cost alone crippled German offensive capacity. A Heinkel He 111, circling for an extra 3 minutes while verifying a doubtful target, burned an additional 15 gallons of fuel. Across 9,000 sorties, that represented 135,000 gallons wasted on target verification. Luftwaffe fuel supplies were already constrained by British attacks on refineries and transportation. Every gallon wasted on confusion was 1 less gallon for offensive operations. By November 1940, German bomber sortie rates began declining, not only because of aircraft losses, but because fuel allocation per mission was reduced by 15%. But perhaps the most significant impact was invisible in the statistics: the psychological burden of uncertainty. Bomber crews who repeatedly arrived at coordinates only to find nothing matching. Their briefing photographs began doubting their navigation skills. If a highly trained navigator with years of experience couldn't reliably find a 600-acre airfield, what did that say about mission planning? What did it say about intelligence? Luftwaffe aircrew morale reports from October 1940 document increasing frustration with target identification difficulties and unreliable intelligence photographs. Some crews requested additional training in photo interpretation. Others requested updated target folders. The problem wasn't training or photographs, it was that the targets were deliberately confusing. The Luftwaffe began diverting resources to reconnaissance, more flights, more photographs, more analysis. Oberkommando der Luftwaffe established a dedicated photo analysis unit at Zossen, southeast of Berlin, staffed by 47 officers and 200 enlisted personnel, specifically tasked with identifying British camouflage techniques. Those resources, people, aircraft, fuel, time, were resources not devoted to bombing. The camouflage program forced the Luftwaffe to fight two battles, one against RAF fighters, one against landscape illusion. They couldn't win both. The deeper truth. On 31st October 1940, Hitler cancelled Seelow, Operation Sea Lion, the planned invasion of Britain. Multiple factors contributed. RAF Fighter Command hadn't been destroyed, Royal Navy still controlled the channel, weather was deteriorating. But the Luftwaffe's failure to neutralise British airfields was critical. German High Command had calculated that sustained airfield attacks would render Fighter Command inoperable within 3 weeks. 6 weeks into the campaign, RAF Fighter Command was operating at 87% capacity. Most airfields were functional. Most squadrons were operational. The math didn't work. Post-war interrogations of Luftwaffe commanders revealed their frustration. Generaloberst Hans Jeschonek, Luftwaffe Chief of Staff, testified in 1946. We were told by intelligence that British airfield camouflage was primitive and ineffective. This was not accurate. Our bomber crews repeatedly reported difficulty locating targets that should have been obvious. Some crews dropped on false targets, decoy airfields that looked authentic from operational altitude. Others circled searching for targets they should have identified immediately. The British turned their landscape into a weapon against us. That last phrase captures the essence of what Turner had achieved. The landscape became a weapon. Not by becoming invisible. That was impossible. By becoming uncertain. By introducing doubt into split-second decisions made under combat stress at 18,000 feet while travelling 250 km/h. The conventional wisdom said camouflage was impractical at airfield scale, and it was correct if you defined camouflage as invisibility. But Turner redefined the problem. He didn't try to hide airfields. He made them ambiguous. He gave German navigators 3-second recognition problems that had no clear answers. Is that a runway or a ploughed field? Those hedgerows crossing the concrete, are they painted or real? That wheat field beside the dispersal area, is it actual farmland or painted canvas? From 18,000 feet at 250 km/h, with fighter warning reports crackling over the radio and flak bursts appearing ahead, those questions couldn't be answered definitively. So the bombs didn't fall, or fell in the wrong place, or fell after too much time over target. The genius wasn't in the painting technique. The genius was in understanding that war isn't fought with perfect information, it's fought with good enough decisions made under terrible pressure. And if you can degrade good enough to uncertain, you've won without firing a shot. The wheat fields, real and painted, weren't about fooling the Luftwaffe completely. They were about adding 3 seconds of hesitation to every targeting decision. 3 seconds multiplied by thousands of sorties equaled strategic failure. On the 10th of May 1941, the Luftwaffe launched its last major raid on Britain before focusing resources on the invasion of Russia. That night, 507 bombers attacked London. Many followed the Thames, a navigation reference impossible to camouflage. But others relied on identifying specific airfields as navigation waypoints. Those bombers struggled. RAF Kenley was overflown by 17 German aircraft without being attacked. The station, camouflaged to look like agricultural land, didn't register as a waypoint. The bombers continued searching, burning fuel, losing formation coherence. By dawn, the blitz was effectively over. The Luftwaffe shifted east. Britain had survived. Turner's camouflage program was classified secret until 1953. The public never knew that painted hedgerows and canvas wheat fields had helped save Britain. But in the restricted files of the Air Ministry, the accounting was precise. 52 airfields camouflaged, 119 K sites constructed, 237 Q sites operational, approximately 900 bombing raids diverted, 11,150 tons of ordnance wasted on false targets, estimated 3,000 lives saved. The cost, £2,730,000, 40,000 square yards of canvas, 847 tons of paint, 2,400 personnel dedicated to camouflage operations. The return, Britain remained unconquered. The impossible camouflage worked because it understood what all the mathematical analysis and Air Ministry skepticism had missed. Warfare isn't engineering, it's psychology. And psychology operates on confidence. Break the confidence, even for 3 seconds, and the bombs miss. The wheat fields, real and painted, did exactly that. They turned certainty into doubt. And doubt, at 18,000 feet over hostile territory, was more effective than any anti-aircraft gun. The paradox resolved completely. The thing everyone knew was impossible worked perfectly because it never attempted the impossible. It attempted something far simpler and far more devastating. It made the enemy uncertain of what they saw. And uncertainty, in war, is death by 1,000 hesitations. The aerial photographs remain in the Imperial War Museum archives. In images from July 1940, RAF Hornchurch looks like farmland, wheat fields and hedgerows stretching across what should be concrete. The photographs are marked in German script. Agricultural zone, low military significance. The Spitfires stationed there would shoot down 152 Luftwaffe aircraft before the year ended. They flew from runways painted to look like wheat fields. The Luftwaffe never targeted them effectively. The wheat, fake and real, had done its job.